All right, I will say good morning. An incredible schos to begin. Another week of the Daf, another week of our new Meseches Nedarim. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan. To thank Yanki and Elisa Statman, Yitzi and Rebecca Statman for dedicating all the Shiurim and Drushos this month, in commemoration of the first yard site of their sister, Menucha Shendel Yehudis Zichron Levracha Bas David Yosef. To thank Shmuel, Rabbi and Karapkin for dedicating the Shiurim this month in commemoration of the 25th yard site of Rabin's mother, Melanie Solomon Pesa Mira Bas Chaim Zichron Levracha. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Mr. and Mrs. Milton Martyr, in commemoration of the yard site of Mrs. Martyr's mother, Rose Steinberg, Rebbetzin Shoshana Rezel Bas Menachem Mendel Yitzchak Zichron Levracha, and Baruch Meir and Rina Dubin, in commemoration of the 25th yard site of Baruch Meir's grandmother, Anita Dubin, Chana Rus Bas Max Zichron Levracha. We hope down to the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, and the family Zein Nechama. But with that, let us begin. So we have an exciting daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Daf Hey 5. We left off on the top of Hey Amud Aleph, actually 3 lines in. So we'll say, if you remember again, we are focusing today on the last line in the Mishnah. So remember again, we've spent an extensive amount of time focusing on the structure of the Mishnah. We've also highlighted really what's been our sticking point this entire time is how the Mishnah begins with a statement about Kinuyei Shvua, right, which means similar or equivalent terms, but then gives an example of Yados, right, a Yad, a partial statement of a Shvua. So now we're focusing on that example. So if you remember again, the Mishnah, the way the Mishnah is phrased, and this is really at the root of all this, the way the Mishnah itself is phrased is a little bit strange, because the lashon of the Mishnah was when it gives the example of a Yad. Remember again, it's Omer lechavero, mudrani mimcha, mufreshani mimcha, miruchukani mimcha. Literally, I'm nedered from you, separated from you, distanced from you. Shani ochel lecha, shani toim lecha. That which I eat of yours, that which I drink of yours. So I will say, so it's not immediately clear how exactly you put together these statements. So remember again, in yesterday's daf, we had 2 versions of Shmuel. 2 versions. In version number 1, Shmuel said, the statements of Mudrani Mimcha, Mifrushani Mimcha, Miruchukani Mimcha, by themselves are absolutely meaningless. They only become meaningful when you add on a modifier of Sha'ocha Lecha or Shashosa Lecha. Right? You need some type of modifier. We left off in yesterday's daf with a second version of Shmuel. The second version of Shmuel is that halacha l'maisa, there are really 2 different situations. When a person says mudrani hemach, mufreshani hemach, miruchokani hemach, you use that lashon actually creates reciprocal prohibition. Right? In other words, so just to illustrate this, I go over to Ruvain, I say, Ruvain, mudrani hemach, I nedered from you. Mufreshani hemach, distance. So we'll say what that effectively does, says Shmuel, is I can't benefit from Ruvain, and Ruvain can't benefit from me. It creates reciprocal prohibition. However, if I go over to Ruvain and I say, Ruvain, shani ochel lecha, which is a yad, the partial statement, shani ochel lecha, what that means is I'm prohibiting myself to benefit from Ruvain, but I'm not creating an isser for Ruvain to benefit from me. That's where we left off, and Rabbi say this is the position not only of Shmuel, but also the position of Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina. And let's just take a look. Kihadam Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina's second line. Hey, we already did this yesterday, but just again, Kihadam Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina mudrani hemach shnehen asurin. This is what Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says when he says again the lashon Rabbi say mudrani hemach. I am nedered from you. Ultimately, again, both of them are prohibited. Both me, the vower, as well as Ruvain, are both prohibited to go ahead and benefit from each other. I will say, just a word of clarification. I know you're thinking to yourself, 1 second, how can I prohibit someone else? Right? So remember again, when we say I prohibit Ruvain, what that's saying is like this. Let's just play this out. I go over to Ruvain, I say Ruvain, mudrani hemach. So according to Shmuel and Rabbi Yosef and Chanina, what that means is I prohibit myself from getting benefits from Ruvain, and I prohibit Ruvain from getting benefit from me. What that means is I prohibit Ruvain from getting any benefit from my property. So I have the ability to do that. It's my property. It's my property. So essentially I'm saying Ruvain is, you are not allowed to get benefit from anything of mine. So it's not really as much that I'm prohibiting Ruvain, but rather what am I doing? I'm prohibiting my property upon Ruvain. In other words, Ruvain, you cannot get any level of benefits from me. So it's not as much that I'm controlling another person, but I'm controlling the way another person interacts with my property, which I have absolutely every right to do. Good. So we'll say that's what we're holding. So now we're going to challenge this a little bit. Here we go. So Tanan, Hareini Alecha Cherem. So we'll say, so now, based on this, what the Gemara assumes is like this. Anytime you kind of use these open-ended statements, it sounds like, according to both Shmuel and Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina, it creates reciprocal prohibition. So let's give an example of this. So tonight we learned, Hareini alecha cherem. I go over to Reuven, I say, Reuven, I am hereby cherem upon you. Cherem upon you. Both say, what would we call that statement? What would you call that? What would you call it? A yad. The pashtus, that's a yad. That's yad. Although we're going to see sometimes the interesting part is something could sound like a yad and a kinui at the same time. But again, let's go. So we'll say, Hareini alecha cherem. I'm cherem unto you. So we'll say, based on what we just said before, according to Rabbi Chanina, what would you think should be the impact of that statement? That sounds like what? Mujrani hemach, mufrashani hemach, which should create reciprocal prohibition. Yet, what does the Mishnah say? Hamudar aser, avamad yirlo. Ultimately, again, I will say, it sounds as if the Mishnah says, the case over here is where the subject of the neder, in this case Ruvain, will be asked to go ahead and benefit from me, but I am not prohibited to benefit from Ruvain. So that seems to contradict what Shmuel and Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina said, to which the Gemara says, no, it's not a kasha, kigon deparish va'at alai lo. So I will say, this is where he made a follow-up statement. In other words, I say to Ruvain, Hareini alecha cherem, I am hereby cherem upon you, and then by the way, there's a modifying statement, va'at alai lo. But you are not prohibited to me. Okay, so if you explicitly say that, then obviously, again, such a neder is only going to work to prohibit Ruvain upon me, but not to prohibit me to Ruvain. Okay. So the Gemara says, the Gemara goes weiter. At alai cherem. So we're recording these, what we would think to be these similar cases. At alai cherem. You are cherem unto me. So we'll say, in general, when you have these open-ended statements, it sounds like they should fall into the category of mudrani hemach, mufrashani hemach, which according to Shmuel and Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina create reciprocal iser. Yet what's the halacha? Hanoder aser, the one who made the neder is aser. Ava mudar, but the mudar also means the subject. We'll call him Ruvain in this case. Lo. So once again, it's a contradiction. To which the Gemara says, no, kigon deparish va'ana alecha lo. This is where I explicitly said, I will not be prohibited unto you. Okay, so I will say the Gemara is answering up all of these cases by claiming that the person making the neder is including an additional modifying statement. Avastama mai. That I will say, but again, so now let's assume in both of these cases, had you not added in the follow-up modifying statements, what would be the impact of Hareini alecha cherem or at alai cherem? What would be the impact? Shnehen asurin. Ultimately, again, what would it do? It would create reciprocal prohibition. Now, both say that. In other words, that seems to line up with what Shmuel and Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina both said. That's whenever you make like these open-ended yados, they create reciprocal prohibition. To which the Gemara said, 1 second, Hamidi Tani Seifa. But look at the end of the Mishnah. Hareini alecha va'at alai. If I go ahead and I say, I'm talking to Ruvain, Hareini alecha, I am hereby upon you, va'at alai, and you are prohibited upon me, shnei asurin. That's when it creates reciprocal isser. Hadenhu d'shnei asurin. It's only in this case that reciprocal isser is created. Aval stama, Rabbi is saying in a stam case, what will be the halacha? Hu aser, the noder, the one making the neder is aser, v'chadero muter. And ultimately, again, his friend, i.e. the subject of the neder, would be muter. Rabbi say this contradicts what we said before. Elahachi itmad Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina. So we'll say, you're right. Let's take a step back. Let's refine the position of Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina. We'll say, now just to understand something over here. The Gemara began with a discussion of Shmuel. And then, I will say Shmuel, right? Then we said Shmuel really holds like Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina. Because what Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina say, at least originally he said, Mudrani Hemach, when you make a general statement, a general yad, like Mudrani, Mifrushani, Miruchukani Hemach, reciprocal iser. Okay? Now we are going to Elahachi Itmar Rabbi Yosef Chanina. The truth is, let's refine Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina's position. Here we go. Mudra ani lecha. If I go over to Ruvain and I say, Ruvain, I am mudar to you, right? I'm nedered to you. Shnehen asurin. Ultimately, again, we're both aser. I'm aser to Ruvain, and Ruvain's aser to me. Watch this. Mudrani hemach. But if I say, I am nedered from you, then what? Who aser? The chavera mutar. I am aser, the one who made the neder, right? I can't benefit from Ruvain, but Ruvain can benefit from me. Rabbi say, isn't this incredible? What's the distinction between these two cases? What's the distinction between these two cases? One word. So just to clarify this again. So the Rabbi say, so now again, we're gonna reject this in just a moment also, but it's an interesting stage. So now what the Gemara is suggesting is there's just what word you use or it's like this. When you say mudrani heimach, mudrani, I'm going to say, let me go in order. I'm sorry. Mudra ani lecha, right? When I say I am nedered to you, lecha creates reciprocal iser. Mudrani heimach, I'm nedered from you, that creates me, the one who's making the neder. I'm usher to Ruvain, Ruvain is not usher to me. They both say, why the distinction? Take a look at the Ran. Actually, this is great because the Ran is right across to the left. Here we go, just the first few lines. Elahachi itma Rabbi Yosef Chanina mudrani licha shnehen asurin dilecha or lach mashma licha kilomar nechase asurin licha umashma mishalach. Shabbos said it's actually very interesting. The Ran explains that the word mudrani lach or mudrani licha lach can mean one of two things. Lach means to you and from you. To you and from you. So ultimately, again, what that lashon does is it goes ahead and it creates reciprocal iser. Kolomar nechase asurin lecha. In other words, I go over to Ruvain. I say mudrani lach or mudrani lecha. So what I'm saying is, Ruvain, what I own is aser to you, and also ultimately, again, what I own, what you own is aser to me. Right? So the lecha, the lach, works for both parties, as opposed to heimach. Heimach, I both say, is a more explicit term. Heimach could only be explained or translated in one way, which is, how would you translate Heimach? From you, and that's all that can mean. So both say, so now in this model, the Gemara is saying, up until now we've been focused on like the first part of Mudrani, Mufreshani. Now the Gemara says the truth is, it really depends on what term you use vis-a-vis Ruvain. So if you say Mudrani Licha or Lach, that creates reciprocal Isser. Heimach, from you, I'm usher to Ruvain. Ruvain is not usher to me. 1 second, the Gemara says, "V'hamias nisin diktani heimach." Yet Rabbi say our Mishnah. Our Mishnah Beis and Dalach from Second Nedarim. Our Mishnah was a lashon of heimach, mudrani heimach, miruchukani heimach, mufreshani heimach, and yet Rabbi say, remember again, v'okmina lemas nisin l'shumla b'kulon at shiyomer shani toim lecha v'ashani ochel lecha hu da'aser b'chavera mutar. Rabbi say yet again, the way we set up the case. So our Mishnah is talking about a case of heimach, and yet Shmuel, right? Rabbi say this is the end of Dalet Amud Beis. Shmuel explained that the neder only takes effect if you include a modifier. Shani ochel lecha, shani shoselach, shani toyim lecha. So we'll say that's the case where what? The person making the neder is aser, but ultimately again, Ruvain, we'll call it, I'm aser, we'll call it, I'm the making the neder, but Ruvain is going to be mutter. Abba b'mudrani heimach, shnehen asurin. Yet Rabbi say, it sounded like based on Shmuel's explanation of the Mishnah, that even a lashon of heimach would create reciprocal iser, which contradicts what we just said before. So we'll say, in version number 2, we are positing as follows. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina says like this: if you use a lashon of lach or lecha, that creates reciprocal iser. Heimach, only the vowel is aser. The subject, we'll call it, is mutar. The Gemara challenges that, because from our Mishnah uses a lashon of heimach, and yet it sounds like from our Mishnah, heimach creates reciprocal iser. Therefore, the Gemara says, Ella, here we go. Meikara the Shmuel Hachi Itmar. In the beginning, here's what Shmuel said. Taima, da Amar Shani Ochalacha, Bashani Toyim Lacha, Hu De'ein Hu Aser, Ella Ba'achila. So let's listen to this. We'll say, what Shmuel meant to say is like this. If halacha l'maisa, right, in the case of the Mishnah, where I go over to her and I say Ruvain, mufrashani, let's just keep it easy. Mudrani l'cha, or mudrani hemach, masha'ani ochel l'cha. Masha'ani l'cha. So watch this. The reason, right, Sataima da amar shani ochel l'cha, vashani tom l'cha, hu de'ein hu asr ela ba'achila. So I will say, watch this. Here we go. Let's bring everything together. When I say, mudrani hemach, sha'ani ochel l'cha, right? I nedered from you that which I eat of yours. What's the result of such a neder? I'm not allowed to eat Ruvain's food. Right? I'm not allowed to eat Ruvain's food. Watch this. Ha, mudrani mimach. But I will say, if I were just to say the word, I go over to her and say, Ruvain, mudrani himach, or mimach, then what? Asr afilu bahana. See, I will say, here's what's interesting. There are two ways you could utilize mudrani. By the way, when I say mudrani includes all of the lashonos of the Mishnah. Mudrani, miruchukani, mifrushani. They're all in the same boat. So watch this. So the Gemara says, Shmuel's idea is the following. If I say mudrani, miruchukani, mifrushani, and I leave it and I qualify it, and I say shani ochalacha, for example, what does that do? That creates a neder that says, I can't get any food benefit, consumption benefit from Ruvain. But if I just say that statement, unqualified, miruchukani mimcha, hemach, or lacha, whatever the lashon is, mufreshani, miruchukani, then that creates an overarching isser hana'ah from Ruvain. Which I say is logical. Logical, right? I can't get any level of hana'ah. To which the Gemara says, Ihachi, if that's the case, Lema Shmuel Hachi, let Shmuel say this. Ve'im lo amar ela shani ochel lecha, v'shani toyim lecha, ein iser ela b'achila. So I will say, here's the problem. Shmuel didn't say this, right? When Shmuel commented in our Mishnah on the bottom of Daled Amud Beis, that's not what Shmuel said. The Gemara says, if that's really what Shmuel said, if that's really what Shmuel meant, Shmuel should have said it. If you just say, miruchukani, mifrushani, mudrani, then that what? Creates a holistic Isser Hana. But if you qualify it by saying, shani ochalacha, that only prohibits you to eat Ruvain's food. If that's what you meant, say it. Problem is, that's not what Ruvain said. That's not what Shmuel said in his commentary to the Gemara. Ella, okay, Rabbi, back to the drawing board again. Here we go. Ella, hachi itmar. Rather, Rabbi say, here is the halacha. Ella, hachi itmar. Taima da amar shani ochel lecha, vashani toim lecha. So what's it? Thank you so much. So, says the Gemara like this. Sorry. Thank you. Ella, hachi itmar. Here we go. Taima da amar shani ochel lecha, vashani toim lecha, hu da aser. So listen to this. We'll say here, now this is not yet the conclusion either, but it's close to the conclusion. Watch this. The Gemara says, Taima da amar shani ochel v'shani tam lecha hu da aser. So we'll say, let's go back. Let's bring this all together. When you go ahead and you say, I go over to Ruvain and I say, Ruvain, and I will say, you could choose any of the lashonos you want from Beis Hamadaf from the Mishnah because they're all the same. I go over to Ruvain and I say, Ruvain, mudrani mimcha, mifrushani mimcha, miruchukani mimcha. I use any of those lashonos, and then what? Shani ochel lecha, v'ashani tolim lecha, hu da'aser. So we'll say, then I've created a neder. Right? What that means is, Ruvain, I can't get any food benefits from you, drink benefits from you, whatever it might be. However, we'll say, here we go. Aval amar mudrani hemach lo mashma da amar aser. So we'll listen to this. But if I just go over to Ruvain and I say, Ruvain, mudrani hemach, mufreshani hemach, that statement is meaningless. And Rabbi said, this is quite interesting. Why is this statement meaningless? Here we go. Rabbi said, now here we're getting into the conclusion of the sugya in halacha l'maisa. Listen to this. My timer, because it's very simple. When you use these lashonos, they can mean a variety of things. For example, mudra ani mimcha. They will say, what does it mean when I go over to Ruvain and I say, Ruvain, I am mudar, right? I am mudred, I am nedered from you. What does that mean? Maybe that means, Lo mishta'ina bahadach mashma. Maybe that means what? I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. Or, mefreshani mimcha. I'm separated from you. Maybe that means, Lo avidna imach masa umatam mashma. I'm not doing business with you. Merichukari mimcha. I'm distanced from you. Lo ka'imna bidalit amos dilach mashma. I'm not even coming anywhere close to you. So what is the Gemara saying over here? Now we're getting to the halacha l'maisa. The Gemara says, you use open-ended expressions like this. Mufrashani, I'm distanced from you. Mudrani, I'm nedered from you. Miruchukani, I'm distanced from you. These can mean a variety of things, and the Gemara is saying these could just mean things. I will say, one thing it clearly means, which is what? Right? I don't really want anything to do with you, right? But that's not a neder. That's not a neder. That could just be saying, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to do business with you. I don't want to be in proximity to you. But Rabosai, it does not create a neder. So Rabosai, when's the only time a neder is created using these lashonos? When is the only time you create a neder? When you append then something else on the end of that. So merichukani mimcha shani ochelacha. Okay. Now you're saying I'm distanced from you. In what way? I'm not eating your food. Right? Or fill in whatever. But you have to append something. You have to append something to that statement. Because the statement by itself clearly indicates that I don't want anything to do with you. But Lamaisa, that's not an neder. Rabbi say, to which leads the Gemara to a profound and incredibly important statement. Lema. Kasavar Shmuel. So Rabbi say, so now, here's what's coming out. So before we even get it, this is the punchline. So even before it's so now it's making sense. So now, when Shmuel comes out, here's what Shmuel meant. All of those Lashonos in the Mishnah, Mudrani Mimcha, Mufrashani Mimcha, Meruchukani Mimcha, by themselves are meaningless statements. When do they become meaningful? Meaningful meaning what? That they create a neder when you append some defined action on the back end of it. Action is the wrong word. When you define when you append something defined to it. Shani ochel lecha, shani toim lecha. Rabbi say, to which the Gemara says, lema kasavar Shmuel yadayim she'ein mochichos lo havyin yadayim. We'll say, here it is. Right? So now we'll say, remember, all of this is a discussion about yados. Remember again, let's go back. What's a yad? Partial statement. So we'll say, here we go, let's get into this. So now we're going to have an interesting machlokes. So we'll say, so a yad, by definition, so we'll say, a yad is a partial statement. Partial statement by definition tells you already what? What is there a partial statement than a complete statement? Right? So remember, a partial statement is by definition not going to be as explicit as a complete statement. So I will say the shaila is now, does a yad have to be clear in some way at all? Right? Does it have to have some level of understanding? That's called yadayim mochichos. Mochichos, also means, mochiach literally means to prove. In other words, that it's true it's a partial statement, but it's understood clearly from the partial statement what you mean to convey. Or do we say no? Even yadayim she'inon mochichos, even unclear partial statements, right? Non-explicit partial statements. It's not even explicit, we'll say, it's clear. Even unclear partial statements work as well. So we'll say, what do you see from here? Shmuel holds, here we go. Shmuel holds that a yad only works if what? If it's muchach. There has to be some level of clarity in your yad. Rabbi say, V'haraya, Shmuel saying, Mudrani mimcha, Mufrashani mimcha, Ruchukani mimcha. I don't know what that means. I don't know. They will say, by the way, I don't know about you, but I would have said, I don't know. That sounds pretty clear. I mean, in the world of yados, you could have made a pretty cogent argument that should work. Because obviously you're using lashonos of prohibiting yourself to something. Yet Shmuel holds it's not enough. You have to append something more explicit, something more specific, something clearer to the end of that statement in order to make it work. So the Gemara says, Shmuel holds that unclear yados, right, ambiguous yados, or inexplicit yados, ultimately, again, is not a yad. So take a look at Rashi, actually, for just a moment. Rashi on the left-hand side, right? Amrina lo muchacham milsa de b'achila ka'amar v'lo misra b'achila. So we'll say, what do you see from here? Because again, even though one could have said, for example, mudrani mimcha, I will say, again, think about this for just a moment. Mudrani mimcha, I nedered from you. I don't know, I know it's not a complete statement, but it should at least be a yad. But Shmuel holds it's not good until you add in there shani ocha lecha, shani toim lecha. Why? Because yadayim she'ein mochichos lo havyon yadayim. To which the Gemara says, in Shmuel mokila lemastisin Rabbi Yehuda. Yes, in fact, Shmuel holds that our Mishnah reflects the Rabbi. Say, by the way, just to understand, if you look back for just a moment, go back to Beis Amud Aleph for just a second. You could see, by the way, now, based on this, how this reads back into the Mishnah. Because remember, again, the Mishnah says, last few lines, Ha'omer lechavero, mudrani mimcha, mofarshani mimcha, meruchukani mimcha, sha'ani ochel lecha, sha'ani toyim lecha. So Shmuel says, why does the Mishnah add in those phrases, sha'ani ochel lecha, sha'ani toyim lecha? Shmuel holds, because otherwise, without those modifiers, meruchukani, mofarshani, mudrani, are yadayim she'enon mochichos. And yadayim she'enon mochichos, a yad that is unclear, is not a yad. The other side, our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? Here we go. The Amar yadayim she'enon mochichos lahavni yadayim. Because Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that yadayim she'enon mochichos. Rabbi will say, so a yad that's not clear, or a yad that's ambiguous, ultimately, again, is not a yad. Now, where do we see this? This is actually quite interesting. This nan, because we learned Gufo shall get. Well, it's actually quite fascinating. Gufo shall get. What's the essence of a get? Right? Divorce document. What's the essence of a get? Gufo shall get. Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam. So we'll say the essence of a get, right? The most important phrase in a get is Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam. Right? It's the exact opposite of what you say under the chuppah. Right? Under the chuppah, a man says to his wife, Hari'at nikudeshes li, tidas Moshe v'Yisrael. Hari'at nikudeshes li, right? Your mind, exclusivity. A get, Hari'at muteres l'chol adam. You're permitted to everyone. Now, I will say, so that is the most important statement in the get. Take a look at the Ran for just a moment. You see the Ran on the right-hand side. You see, I will say, by the way, I meant to mention this. In Nedarim, Tosas, if you notice, by the way, is in the margin. Right, Tosas is there. He's just in the margin. He was kicked off the primary part of the page over. He got bumped. So we'll say. So now, if you see right where Tosas begins on the page, right there in the Ran, Gufo shall get Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam v'lo tzarach lemichtav v'dein below v'dein mashlo debahai gita megarishla v'yu tekam garisha. So we'll say. So listen to this. The first opinion of the Rabbanon is the most important phrase you need in a get is Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam, because the Rabbanon say that makes it explicitly clear that this document is what divorce is what ends this marriage and makes her permitted to every other man. Now watch this. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, that's not enough. You also have to have written into the document what? V'dein diyahavi lechiminai sefer terechim v'igeresh shavukim. Rabbi Yehuda, you also have to have written in the get itself, you have to have written these words. V'dein, and this document will be from me to you, a sefer teruchin, a book. Teruchin, I say, literally is expulsion. The geres shavukin, right? And literally again, a book or a letter of leaving you. So in other words, Rabbi Yehuda holds it's not just enough to write in the phrase Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam. You need explicitly written in the get that it is through this get that we're done. Through this get will serve as a sefer teruchin, as an igeres shvukin. The Rabbi will say, now watch this. What's the machlokes over here? This is incredible. What's the machlokes over here? The Rabbanan hold that it's enough to have written in the get Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam. Right? Rabbi Yehuda holds you need that statement, but you also need follow-up statements. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds yadayim she'inon mochichos lo shmei lo havin yadayim. Because what Rabbi Yehuda holds like this: if you just have the phrase Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam, Rabbi Yehuda is concerned that a person may think that maybe the actual get is affected through dibur, is affected through words, right? Therefore, you need to have explicitly written in there, this is a book of teruchin, this is a book of shavukin. It is through this document that we are concluding our marriage. The Rabbanon hold, no you don't. People understand it based on the phrase that what? Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam. So the Gemara is suggesting, what's the machlokes? What's the machlokes? Do we hold yadayim she'ein mochichos havi yadayim or lo havi yadayim? The Rabbanon hold that a yad does not have to be explicit. That's why they hold it's enough just to go ahead and say, Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam. Rabbi Huda says no, because that statement by itself could lead one to an erroneous thought that maybe Gittin is affected through Dibor. Therefore, you need to be explicit in the get itself and write, this is the book that dissolves the marriage. Take a look at the Ran for just one more moment. Rabbi Yehuda Omer B'din, Tilo Kasa B'din, Havyan Yadayim Shen Mochichos, the Dilma B'dibura Megarishla. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is concerned about. He's concerned that even though you have this statement written in the get, Hari'at mutaris l'chol adam, because it's not explicit, that what? What's not explicit? What's not explicit is that it's the get itself that's affecting divorce. You might think that divorce is affected through dibor. So Rabbi Yehuda holds yadayim she'enon mochichos, a partial statement that is not explicit is not a valid statement. So Rabbi say, carrying this to Nedarim, Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel has Rabbi Yehuda, and that's why Shmuel understands our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore what? Well, here we go. It's all comes together so beautifully. Therefore what? When the Mishnah introduces us to the concept of yados, what does the Mishnah say? First it gives the general statements, Mudrani mimcha, Mifrushani mimcha, Miruchukani mimcha, and then I will say, what's the next part of the Mishnah? Let's follow it up with a statement. What's the statement? Shani ocha lecha, Shani toim lecha. Why? We'll say, why is that there? Shmuel posits because our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds yadayim she'enon mochichos, enon yadayim. That a partial statement that's not explicit is not a proper yad. And therefore, again, the statements of mudrani mimcha, mifrushani mimcha, meruchukani mimcha by themselves are absolutely meaningless. Because that's a yad she'enon muchach. It's an inexplicit, ambiguous, unclear yad. Therefore, it doesn't work. Only once you append shani ocha lecha, shani toim lecha, do I now understand what we're talking about. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. To which the Gemara says, one second, Amai dochik Shmuel lo ukma lemasnisin Rabbi Yehuda. So we'll say, but why does Shmuel have to go out of his way to establish our Mishnah? We'll say our Mishnah means the Mishnah on Beis Daleth. Why does he have to go out of his way to establish our Mishnah? Sorry. Or right, why does he have to go out of his way to establish our Mishnah? Ultimately, again, as holding Rabbi Yehuda, lukma kirabanan, establish it like Rabbanon, afagad be'inidai mochichos. So we'll say, it's machlokas. Right, so now it's a machlokas. So just like you have Rabbi Yehuda who holds that yadayim she'inon mochichos, lo havin yadayim, that an inexplicit, unclear, ambiguous yad is not the proper yad, there's also the Rabbanon. And I will say, what do the Rabbanon hold? Yadayim she'inon mochichos, havin yadayim. They hold that even a partial statement that's not clear, that's ambiguous, that's inexplicit, ultimately, again, is still a proper yad. So, Shmuel, why do you have to go out of your way to set up the Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda, set up the Mishnah like the Rabbanon? To which the Gemara says, Amar Rava, Masnisin Kashise. Rava says like this. That's because Rabbi Shmuel had a problem with the Mishnah. Always had a problem with the Mishnah. Amai ta'ani shani ochel lecha, shani toim lecha, listni shani ochel, shani toim. So it's very interesting. So ultimately, again, what Shmuel was bothered by is like this. Halacha l'maisa, why did the Mishnah have to say shani ochel lecha, shani toim lecha to you? Just say shani ochel, shani toim. In other words, that would have been enough. They both say, why is the lecha necessary? So they both say, what does lecha accomplish? What does lecha accomplish? Lecha accomplish it makes it explicit. It makes it explicit. Leaving aside reciprocal right now, because we kind of moved past that a little bit. We don't know, right? The Gemara kind of, remember again, that was part of approach number 2. The Gemara kind of abandoned that a little bit. We're now approach. So we'll say, what Shmuel looks like, he's like, I don't understand. If a yad doesn't have to be muchach, right? If a yad doesn't need to be explicit, then just say, right? Mudrani mimcha shani ochel. Okay. In other words, let's say you don't have to be a rocket scientist to kind of like understand what you think devourer is trying to accomplish in that. Why do you have to add in lecha? So we'll say what lecha adds again is a level of explicitkeit, right? In other words, it adds on an additional level of specificity. So we'll say, so now Shmuel sees that and he says, well, it must be that the Mishnah is trying to drive home the point that what? That a yad has to be muchach. that a partial declaration, although it doesn't have to be complete, and fully 1,000% explicit, has to be explicit enough that what? You understand exactly what the intent of the vower truly is. To which the Gemara says, Shmamina, Ba'inon Yadayim Shmochichos. We'll say, learn from here that what? That Allah Chalamaisa, although a yad, the partial declaration works, a partial declaration only works if what? If it's muchach, if it's clear, and if it's explicit what the intent of the vow really was. So we'll say, this, by the way, major development. Major Nedarim development. We'll see that Allah Chalamaisa in just a moment. So we'll say, so now I know that a yad works. That's not a chiddush. I knew that a yad worked already from 2 minutes into Nedarim. Right? But Lamaisa, now I know that there's a machlokes about does a yad have to be muchach or not? Does it need to be explicit or can it be ambiguous? And it sounds like, at least according to Shmuel, according to our Mishnah, that a yad has to be muchach. Yadayim have to be mochichos. So we're not finished with this. Here we go. Both sides finish up the daf. Itmar. Yadayim shel mochichos. Both sides. This is actually machlokes amoraim. It's a machlokes amoraim. So here we go. Yadayim shel mochichos. Both say what happens? So again, just to define our terms, a yad, partial declaration, she'ena mochichos means it's a bit ambiguous, unclear, or inexplicit. What's the status of such a yad? Here we go. Abaye Amar Habin Yadayim. Abaye says it works. It works. The Rava Amar Lo Habin Yadayim. And Rava says it doesn't work. Amar Rava, Rabbi Idi Asabrali. So Rava says, I'm going to tell you the truth. How do I know? How do I know that it doesn't work? Because Rabbi Idi taught me the following halacha. Amar Kra, this is great. The pasuk says, Nazir lahazir. Never say, remember again. What did we learn out from Nazir lahazir? Remember again? What did we learn? Nazir lahazir is the source that yados, that there's a concept of yad. But watch this. Rabbi Idi took this a step further. So Nazir lahazir laHashem, makish yados naziris lenaziris. This is incredible. Rabbi Idi takes this one step further. Nazir means an explicit neder nazirus. Lahazir teaches me what? That even a yad works. But the Torah compares a yad to a complete neder nazirus. And what does the comparison accomplish? Ma nazirus ba'afla, af yados nazirus ba'afla. Just like a neder nazirus must be fully, explicitly articulated, so to a yad must be explicitly clear as well. I will say, remember again, a yad by definition is never going to be as clear as a complete, explicit articulation, but it has to be explicit enough that its intent is completely understood. Incredible. Shabbos is machlokes. So we'll say, perhaps, let's say, that Abaye and Rabbi, so remember again, Abaye says that ultimately, again, a yad does not have to be muchach. It doesn't have to be explicit. It doesn't have to be explicitly clear. Rabbi holds, it has to be. So the Gemara says, maybe the machlokes Abaye and Rabbi is the same machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon by Gittin. Disnan, also we just mentioned it before. Gufal shall get. What is the essence of a get? So Hari'at mutaris l'choladam. The Rabbanon say all it has to say is Hari'at mutaris l'choladam. Once you have that phrase written in a get, you are good to go. You're good to go. That's all you need. Rabbi Yehuda says no. The dain the yahabi lechei minoi sefer terechin the get pturin the geras shavukin. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, holds that's not true. Halacha l'maaseh, for a get to be effective, what has to happen? It has to be explicit, right? This is a document of expulsion, right? A letter of abandonment. A get peturin, right? A document ultimately again of making you free. So we would say Abaye Damar Rabban, Rabbi Yehuda. So we'll say beautiful. We could set up the Amoraim like the Tanoim that ultimately again Abaye who holds that Yadayim she'inon mochichos havyin Yadayim, he'll hold like the Rabbanon. Rava who holds Yadayim she'inon mochichos lo havyin Yadayim will be like Rabbi Yehuda. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Rava holds, right, sorry. So Abaye holds like the Rabbanon. Rava Damar Rabbi Yehuda. Abaye will say no. Abaye is not saying. Remember again. Abaye says Yadayim she'inon mochichos havyon Yadayim. That even a yad that's not explicit still works. And Abaye says the truth is my shita works even according to the Rabbanon. Why? Listen to this. Rava Damar Rabbi Yehuda. Amar lecha Abaye. And Amri Afil Rabbanon. I'm sorry. Amr Abaye. Amr lecha Abaye. Aned da Amri Afil Rabbi Yehuda. We'll say 4 lines up from the bottom. Hammer days. So listen to this. Abaye says I could hold even like Rabbi Yehuda. House and Abba said. Remember again, Abayi was the one who said that yadayim she'enon mochichos, ultimately again having yadayim, that even an inexplicit yad works. Now he says, my opinion could even work in contrast to Rabbi Yehuda. What's saying? Rabbi Yehuda said by get, what do you need? You need all of these additional phrases that make it explicitly clear. Why? Ad kamo kam Rabbi Yehuda ba'ini yadayim mochichos ela gabe get de ba'inon krisos v'leka. Shabbos Abai will say like this. Rabbi Yehuda was saying you need to be explicit by get. Right? Why do you have to be explicit by get, Rabbi say? Because you have to be explicit by get. Because a get is a get krisos. And Rabbi say, we know, by the way, that anything that halacha lamaisa leaves some level of connection between husband and wife undermines the effectiveness of gerushin, undermines the effectiveness of divorce. So Abaye says, you're taking Rabbi Yehuda's shita by gittin and you're globalizing it. Right? So what you're saying is because Rabbi Yehuda says you have to be 1,000% explicit in a get. It's not enough just to write Hari'ak Muteras L'chol Adam, you're permitted to every man. No, you have to write that this get is the book of abandonment, this book is the get of expulsion, this book is the book of separation. You have to write, okay, because by gittin, you need krisos. By gittin, it has to be 1,000,000% clear that this get represents the total severing of the marital bond. But that's by gittin. That's by gittin. Aval ba'alma misham mislei. So what Abai is pointing out over here is, and this is an interesting, the Gemara just so you appreciate it, the Gemara made a wild and dramatic jump. We took the positions of Rabbi Huda and Rabbanon by gittin, and we assumed that we could expand these shitas out to as many different cases as we want. So we took by gittin, suddenly we took those opinions by gittin and we applied it to Nedarim. And Abai is saying, where'd you get that from? Where'd you get that from? Rabbi Huda only holds that you have to be explicitly clear by gittin because a get has to be a sefer krisos, has to fundamentally, totally and wholly sever the marital bond. But perhaps by Nedarim, Rabbi Huda would agree that yadayim she'enon mochichos works. Similarly, Rava Amar, Adam if you look at Rabbanon. Rava says the truth is, now remember again, Rava holds that yadayim she'enon mochichos lo havin yadayim. Right? That if you have a yad that's not explicit, it doesn't work. But Rava will say the truth is, my shita works very well even with the Rabbanon. Why? How so? So watch this. Ad kamo kam Rabbanon dilo b'nei yadayim mochichos ela gabe get. Rava will say, by get, remember again, according to the Rabbanon, what do you need by get? What do you need by get? All you need is one phrase, which is Hari'ab Mutaras Chodam. I just want to be clear, it's not a topic, but when the Rabbanon say you only need one phrase, of course, no one's saying you only need one phrase, right? A get has many different parts. You need the name of the husband, name of the wife, whereas what they're saying is the phrase in the get which affects divorce. The Rabbanon are saying all you need is that phrase, Hari'at Mutaras L'chol Adam. That's all you need. So Rava says, it's only by get that the Rabbanon don't require a greater level of explicitness, right? Explicitkeit, right? This is a guide. Why? Was I top above? The ein adam megarish as eshes chavero. Here's the interesting part. When you're divorcing someone, there's not too much ambiguity as to who you're divorcing. Right? In other words, I will say, even if a man is married to two women, right, more the chances are they don't have the same name. So a get has the name of the husband, get has the name of a wife. So I will say, when Reuven is divorcing Rachel, we haven't used Reuven and Rachel in a while, by the way, right? We missed them. Right? When Reuven is divorcing Rachel, it's clear who he's divorcing. So even if the statement itself is not 1,000,000% explicit, you don't need it to be. The ein adam megarish es eshes chavero. For the simple reason is, you can't divorce your friend's wife. In other words, it's abundantly clear who it is you're divorcing. So because that the Rabbanon holds, even a yad she'enon muchach, right? Even a partial statement that's not explicitly like 1,000,000% clear, it's understood. Aval ba'alma misham mislei. Rabbi say, but perhaps in the case of Nedarim, perhaps even the Rabbanon would agree that you need yadayim mochichos. Therefore, Rabbi say, the Gemara is pointing out over here, our attempt to align the Amoraim, Abayi, and Rava with the Rabbanon and Rabbi Huda in the Mishnah and Gittin doesn't necessarily line up. Rabbi say, let me just share with you two last things that we're going to stop for today. So first of all, this sugi is not finished. This sugi is not finished yet. But I just want to tell you, just for the purpose of just being able to hold on to something, the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Nedarim Parak Aleph Halacha Chav Gimel. The Rambam writes, Ha'omer lechavero, mudra ani mimcha, mashma davar zeh shelo yidar be'imo. So we'll say, so bottom line, we're going to see that the Rambam paskins that a yad only works if it's muchach. If it's muchach. The Rambam paskins, yadayim she'enon mochichos, lo havyan yadayim. A partial statement will work. As long as what? As long as it's what? As long as it is explicitly clear. That's why I will say, the Rambam says, if you go over to your friend, I go over to her and I say, Ruvain, mudar ani mimcha, I'm nedart from you. The Rambam says, you know how we interpret that? We interpret that as to mean, I don't want to talk to you. Right? Mufresh ani mimcha. Right? I'm separated from you. We interpret that as what? I don't want to do business with you. Meruchak ani mimcha, I'm distanced from you. It means I don't want to come into your dalal amas. It's not Nedarim. It's not Nedarim. Right? The Rambam goes through all of these cases, and the Kesef Mishnah says, ultimately again, she'ein yadayim mochichos lo hav yadayim mechein pasek rabbeinu. So we'll say that's how the Rambam paskins. A yad, the partial statement will work, but it has to be yadayim mochichos. It has to be a yad that is explicitly understood. So it could be a truncated form of a neder statement, but it has to be incredibly explicit. I will say, speaking about this last night a little bit, this idea of yadayim she'ein mochichos lo hadyin yadayim. It's such a profound statement also on a hashkafic level. Shabbos saying, what's the yad? What does the yad? So okay, here yad means a partial declaration. But your yad means your hand. Your yad means your hand. Shabbos say, the hand is ultimately, again, how we produce in this world. The hand, right, represents our accomplishment. That's why I remember, again, every single morning we put on tefillin shel yad, tefillin shel rosh. So my tefillin shel rosh means I'm binding my mind, my soul, the neshama, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The yad represents my physical prowess. This is how I accomplish. This is how I do things. So ultimately, I'm buying that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbos said, it's interesting that in life, a lot of people talk about what they're going to do. Right? They talk. Right? Here's my plan. Here's what I'm going to do. And they have the best plans. Right? And the most beautifully articulated visions. There's only one problem, which is what? They fail to deliver. They just never act. Never act. Again, I will say, so many people go through life like this. These beautiful ideas, ideals, dreams, aspirations, but they never act. I will say, you know what we call that? That's a yad she'enon muchach. That's yadayim she'enon mochichos. Muchach means something explicit, clear, or proven. Yadayim she'enon mochichos are hands that don't prove anything. Hands that don't do anything. Hands that don't explicitly bring into this world a comprehensive vision. I will say, what's the status of yadayim she'enon mochichos? What's the halacha? Einon yadayim. Right? Einon yadayim. Lo havin yadayim. So I will say, because at the end of the day, when you have hands, you have the ability to accomplish, talking about what you're going to do is very nice, as long as it lays the groundwork for dynamic activity. But if you don't launch, if you don't produce, if you don't actually create something, that's yadayim she'enon mochichos. It's hands that have proven nothing, right? It's inexplicit hands, it's inexplicit koach. And koach, which remains unactualized, koach, which remains in the planning stages, lo havyon yadayim. It's not a proper use of one's dynamic life prowess. So we should be Zocheh Meretz Hashem. It's Sunday. What a great way to start the week. Meretz Hashem should be a week of big dreams, big goals, and big aspirations. But more than that, we should be Zocheh Meretz Hashem to live a life of Yadayim Mochichos. Shterach Abosai.